Well, we have come to a very interesting point in history in which everything seems to be coming down. As a matter of fact, the projection of all trends is that the human species is being reduced by the order of the Queen of England to a rapid reduction of the human population from 7 billion persons to less than 1. And what the tumult is about and all these things that are going on, including Obama and whatnot, these things are all a reflection of the British monarchies and the British Dutch monarchies, actually, intention to reduce the human population from 7 billion persons to less than 1. And that at a rapid rate. There is no other plot in all of history today which is not less than that the British Empire, which is the principle of evil, the Anglo-Dutch Empire, is the principle of evil on this planet, which has for a very long time, as we trace it from ancient history events, that mankind has been condemned to be a mere puppet of an oligarchical power, the oligarchical power of evil. And the time has come when we can no longer submit to that evil. It is not possible to consent to any agreement of policy with those forces which are the true evil of our times and have been evil for long periods of time. A small part of the world's population, at least as we know it in terms of the European region, for a long time this region has been dominated by an oligarchical cult which has taken various guises and has reduced modern man to nothing but a puppet of monsters such as the Anglo-Dutch tyranny, which dominates to the greatest degree all of the people of this planet presently. The time has come in which we can no longer consent to the power of that force of evil, which before the Roman Empire and after the Roman Empire has continued to destroy mankind, corrupt mankind, and has now come to the great gross intention expressed by Her Majesty herself to rapidly reduce the population of this planet from 7 billion persons to less than 1. That is the only reality with which we have to confront ourselves and them today. We can no longer play games and say we can interpret this thing one way or the other, or we can influence, we can reform these people. You can't reform them. They're satanic in their characteristics and always have been. And you have ancient legends which pertain to these, but these legends are not purely legends. They were crafted like poetry or like song as a theme to convey an idea to people generally. And we come to the time now that since, before this queen got on this kick, the kick of cutting the human species from, 7 billion people to 1 or less? Do you know what the population of China is? Approximately estimated at 1.4 billion people. How can you squeeze 1 billion people still allowed to live by the British monarchy and feed that into 1.4 million Chinese? You can't, which means the determination is, and it's to do it now. It's being done now. It has been in progress now, is to reduce the human population. And if they can't get their way, their intention is to use nuclear warfare as a way of dealing with a resistant population. You're dealing with a purely satanic form of evil which has been the satanic principle which has dominated much of the world's history, especially European history, for so long. And people have said, let's be practical, let's be practical. Don't go too far. You have to make a deal with them. You have to be acceptable to them, and maybe they won't kill you. Submit, and you might survive. Or some of you might survive. And then you can rebuild from there. And that's what we face. Now there's another side to this thing, a completely opposite side, which I am pleased to present to you. Having said that much. The time has come when, since the assassination of Kennedy by British and U.S. forces, oligarchical forces, who did the job, the dirty job, and the British Queen, who together with her conquered the, or what I could call them unpleasant names, that these people are determined now to send the United States into this kind of warfare, to send the world into this kind of warfare, just exactly as I've previously, a few months ago, expressed. This is what the intention is. Now, in the meantime, with the killing of Kennedy, which was part of this process, the murder of Kennedy, and then his brother later, the alternative is we have to, in the spirit of such people as the founders of what became America, we have to take charge. Now, we have not been taking charge since people capitulated to the assassinations done against our people, done against the United States, done against our presidency. The time has come that they cannot survive with their scheme of 1.1 billion people, no more, instead of 7. We now have to take charge. And what they've done, which they did with the assassination of Kennedy, they moved in order to stop real net progress of humanity. They didn't bother too much about Asia at that time. They thought they could get around to that later. The intention was focused upon Europe, the United States, and the Americas generally. So you see you have a continuation of a growth of the population of China, some slight improvement per capita of the conditions of the people of China, an Asia which still exists in part, though India is now on the verge of something very bad, very critical. And we've come to the point that we have to take charge. And the symptom for what reasons we have to take charge is that the present trend is the human population is now being driven by the British Monarchy and explicitly by the intention of the Queen, the stated intention of the Queen of England, the stated intention of the Dutch, who really own the Queen of England, the Dutch oligarchy. And they are determined to do this job. And they are the enemy we must defeat. Now, the enemy we must defeat will be defeated by the weapons of progress. And we have to understand what progress is. There has been almost no progress in the transatlantic region, that is net progress, since the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Virtually none. You look at the figures on population, on the conditions of life, and so forth. There has been no net improvement in the economic conditions of life of the citizens of the United States as a collection since the assassination of Kennedy. Now, and his brother Bob, who was assassinated to get rid of him too, and expressed their intention. And what you have lived in under this nation, you've lived under presidents which for the most part were criminals. They were criminals who accommodated themselves to this kind of mass slaughter. This has been intended for a long time. The very existence of the founding of the United States and the American colonies in North America at the same time. The time had come, with 2 world wars, and the conclusion of the second and the third, so-called, that now the British oligarchy and what it represents is now moving to slaughter the majority of the human population. That slaughter is already in place. Two presidents, George W. Bush and Obama, are the chosen perpetrators of the horror show that's been going on this far. Now, Obama might be dumped tomorrow morning, but that doesn't make much difference. It does make difference in the sense of getting him out of office. It means a thing for our citizens and so forth. It's very significant. But what's important is to change the policy, to eliminate the oligarchy, to shut down Wall Street. Now, Wall Street ain't worth nothing. They've never repaid anything in terms of promissory notes, and never will. They are on the verge planning now, possibly short time from now, things get too rough, probably by the end of this year. They probably will shut down Wall Street. Not entirely, because Wall Street cannot possibly be sustained on its present form of behavior. There's no way that Wall Street can avoid terminal bankruptcy. That doesn't mean that they intend to give up things. It means that they're willing to dump most of their Wall Street comrades in favor of a few, in accord with the principle of the British Queen, who stated repeatedly to reduce the human population from a recent level of 7 billion people to less than 1 billion people. And that's the policy, declared policy of the British Monarchy, the Dutch, and so forth. That's their stated policy. And only people who profess themselves to be blind and deaf could deny that. The evidence is everywhere. Look at the condition, the trend and condition of lives, the social conditions, which occurred in the United States in particular. Immediately, with the assassination of John F. Kennedy. So therefore, the time has come that a change has to be made. The answer is generally what that change is. We have to take charge. And we have to take charge as a nation founded on the principles of the United States, the true principles of the United States. Go back to that Constitution and the intention which underlied it later. That's our policy. We have to grab power. How? Well, one thing that will do it is a successful support for Glass-Steagall now. Glass-Steagall means, its enactment would mean, that is, its enactment as intended, would mean a shutting down of Wall Street. Because Wall Street has built up a massive amount of debt, which they say you owe, but you didn't invest in it. You didn't contribute to it. You didn't authorize it. And therefore, say, well, if Glass-Steagall is enacted, automatically Wall Street, as we have known it, ends. It's no good to us. It doesn't do anything for us, for people. It doesn't do anything for the physical economy. It makes no contributions. It's a sucking parasite on everything in the world as well as in our own nation. And therefore, our main issue, that is our target, our goal, is the immediate installation of Glass-Steagall. Franklin Roosevelt's Glass-Steagall reenacted. that will do the job, provided we take the other measures of government which are necessary to fulfill that operation. Just assume there probably is very little that's honestly owed to anyone in Wall Street. If every person in Wall Street were to go bankrupt, we could treat that as a bonanza. Maybe they had something coming to them out of all those things they stole. But if they lose everything, well, it would be only just. I'm not proposing to deprive them of anything they've got coming to them, honestly coming to them. But I estimate it will probably be very little. Now, the point, this is a very serious business because the time has come in which these actions, or actions tantamount to this, must be taken. And you have to base everything on positive results, positive changes, not negative ones, in any real sense of the term negative. It means that we have to, suddenly, a nation, ours, which has made no net real economic progress since the immediate aftermath of the death, the assassination of John F. Kennedy. There has been no net progress in the United States economy for the people of the United States since that assassination of John F. Kennedy. What happened immediately? They killed John, and they killed his policies, too. His policies were revival policies based on the policies of Franklin Roosevelt and promoted by Eleanor Roosevelt, who was the campaign manager for John F. Kennedy. So they immediately shut down what the Kennedy program was, which had been the same program based on the conceptions of our former president, Franklin Roosevelt. And what happened was they did a trick, which is called Truman. Truman is otherwise known as a trick, a dirty one. And Truman was what they did was when President Roosevelt was ready to win the war. And if you look back at what Roosevelt's policies were for during the war and the post-war period, and compare them with what the policies were of Truman, and you understand what happened. So Roosevelt had a policy of reorganization of the planet. His partner included the Soviet leadership and other forces, because the point was to end war and to bring nations together on the basis of a programmatic program which would mean peaceful resolution of the difficulties. The minute that President Roosevelt died, this entire policy was canceled by the forces associated with Truman, Harry S. Truman, or Harry S. Truman, if you prefer. So we've had a long time, but we didn't stop there. What happened under Truman, we transformed our war heroes into something less than heroic. We took this whole population coming out of the war. We divided it into two categories under Truman. One category was the so-called anti-capitalist or anti-communist category. And they were pitted to get all the good jobs, all the good opportunities, all the political promotion and so forth. Whereas the rest of the population, which was the majority of the American labor force, was persecuted. Now, with the getting rid of Truman as president, we did manage to make some progress in killing that kind of policy of Roosevelt. But we never uprooted it. And therefore, this oligarchical policy, which is what the right name for it is, the oligarchical policy still was powerful. And it was powerful because it based itself on the connection to the British Empire and its history. And therefore, that's the mess we were in. And we have been in the mess because people were cowardly. Even good people. Johnson was not a bad person, President Johnson. But he was a scared person. And he said so. He said, I'm not going to fight these guys because they have the guns and they will use them. So therefore we went into a process which we were no longer the sovereign states of the United States, because we were living under the tyranny of a foreign imperial power, the Anglo-Dutch power, which dominates the planet still to this day. Now the time has come that the debts claimed by the oligarchy will never be paid anyway, one way or the other. There's no value in them. If you crush the American people, the people of Europe, you're only going to kill off the people who would have paid these debts you want from them. So we come to a time of decision. Now, the other side of this thing is we have done very little in the United States in the way of improving the conditions of life of the population of the United States in particular, but also other parts of the world. France has been degenerating under this influence. Germany has been degenerating under this same kind of influence. Other parts of Europe are degenerating. Russia has degenerated under these conditions. The Soviet Union degenerated under these conditions. Russia in general disintegrated. And therefore, we've been going down. The standard of living, the productive powers of labor generally, and everything else is good, has been sliding down into failure and chaos. While the bloodsuckers have been of Wall Street and similar kinds of institutions have prevailed. The time has come that they themselves, the bloodsuckers, no longer have any way, any means to maintain economic growth, even the preservation of the U.S. economy. Because their very policies, like the policies of Wall Street, they cannot reconcile the policies of Wall Street, which is nothing but a bloody parasite. There's nothing in it. There's nothing worth anyone. You could cancel and close the doors of Wall Street today, and nobody would lose much of anything. As a matter of fact, they'd have an immediate gain. But the problem is, since the death of Kennedy, the assassination of Kennedy, the United States has made no net progress in our economic system. And that's what we have to change. So therefore, we have to have the resolution to oppose this evil, which I've just broadly described. But that's not enough. What we're doing now is coming based on the basement operations, is the way we organized it. And what we took a policy of starting with what was called NWAPA. That is the water system which had been planned during the time of John F. Kennedy. The NWAPA policy based on water management. Since that time, changes in technology, since the 1944-45 period, changes in technology now enable us to shoot ahead and create an entirely new opportunity for mankind through thermonuclear power. Now, thermonuclear power as a power has been in place, well, in my time, say the 1970s, at that period. We had a fairly clear sense of that. Some of us were part, as I was, of this energy flux density program. And had this been implemented, we wouldn't have much of a problem today. But that was exactly what was killed beginning from the 1970s on. And we have had no net progress in terms of physical measurements, no net progress in the economy of the United States since that time. Now, the other side of that is that nobody has taken the chance on introducing that program. We located the possibility of such a program in NWAPA, the water program, for covering the entire area from the Mississippi really on and north up to Alaska and down into Mexico. That was never implemented. It was discussed but never implemented. It was talked about but never implemented. But the time has come now when time has passed since 1946 and so forth. And now we require more advanced technology. So in the meantime, in the course of the 1920s, we had entered into what was then known to be the case as thermonuclear fusion as a driver force, to get out of the old kinds of ways of generating power and change the character of the economy as a whole to energy flux density, thermonuclear energy flux density. And that is the estimated state of affairs right now, the state of opportunity. If we take that resort, then we can launch now, together with Glass-Steagall. If we get the true Glass-Steagall, an honest Glass-Steagall, adopted in the United States now, and if we supplement that or complement it with this kind of project, thermonuclear fusion-based considerations, we can open up, not immediately, but we can in the coming 2 years. We could, in the coming 2 years, out of those conditions, we could stabilize the situation, just as Roosevelt did in his early recovery program in the 1930s. You stabilize the program. The problem is we have a U.S. population which in great part is simply terrorized and incompetent. They no longer have self-confidence. They no longer believe in themselves. Look at what you see on the streets. Look at the population on the streets. Look at the various successive generations of younger people. See what has happened to them, generation by generation of young people. It's redegeneration. And therefore we have to be patient in a certain degree. We have to get things moving. We have to launch a credit system. We have to do things that Roosevelt did, of the type he did back in the first couple of years of his administration. And we're going to be doing things that some people would think are just wasteful. But they're not wasteful because they're giving people back the courage to fight, to live. And that is not waste. Huh? And that's what we have to do. So we're not going into, I can't promise you any great times, any great economic I can only promise you that if we do this, we can stop the bloodshed. And we can go on after a couple of years to the point we begin to get substantial increases in real growth. The problem is that very few people, even among us, realize the importance of putting that program on the agenda. They say, well, it's not practical. And when somebody says something is not practical under certain circumstances, I have to say, you are not practical, because you're not doing anything to change this. People who are not doing things because they say they're not practical are not themselves practical because they're not doing anything to make it better. They're only doing something to make it worse by refusing to do something to make it better. And Roosevelt understood that. So you get people to actually mobilize themselves for net progress, even though it doesn't seem to be much of an improvement. Getting people back to work, getting them back to a sense of identity within the economy, getting them off the streets and into reality is the price we're going to have to pay as a precondition for saving this nation, and also by saving our nation, creating the circumstances for saving civilization, a civilization which is presently at this moment is in danger of mass exterminations. That's where we are. And what we have now is we have a program. The program is based on the basement team operation. It's not limited to that by any means, but that's a stimulant. And that stimulant is prepared to take measures starting from thermonuclear fusion on down. Not up to thermonuclear fusion, start from there. Because if you're going to develop a thermonuclear fusion program, you are predetermining the environmental pre-circumstances necessary to create a recovery of not only the United States, but of the entire region immediately of the Trans-Pacific area, which is a crucial area. It has a lot of people in it. It has over 1 billion Indians, 1.2 billion in Chinese, and so forth. So it's not a small area, not an unimportant area. It is not yet destroyed. But if it is redefined and promoted, then you will find that the fact that the marginal capabilities of production in those parts of Asia will be a stabilizing factor on which we can proceed to develop a recovery of the planet as a whole. So there are no miracles in the sense of miracles as dreamers go. What we have is a tough fight built for us. Without, the promises are not great, but the promise is not being destroyed. And that's the first demand, that we not be destroyed or allow ourselves to be destroyed. And realizing it's going to take a couple of years, as Roosevelt demonstrated that, to get the economy actually to begin to move upward. You have to be patient, but the most important thing is you cannot have our citizens and our young people convinced that they are being thrown on the ash can. And there are many of them who are being thrown on the ash can. Therefore, you have to restore recognition of the right to a living, the right to an opportunity, which must be given to every sane American citizen and adolescent. Establishing that is the precondition for any possible success. And what we need at the same time is a driver program based on a thermonuclear functional capability, which will lead, over the coming generation, will lead to the greatest economic recovery that mankind has ever conceived. That's the program for now. And every program after that is based on now. We must now determine, through the aid of a Glass-Steagall law, reenacted. Just reenacted. That's all you require. Reenacted. And then some credit system created by the cleaned up banking system, the real banking system, and give them the credit, on credit, to expand the credit in banks and in similar kinds of institutions, to make contributions as loans to promote productive activities and employment of people in productive activities, to get them back into reality. That is what we can do. That is what we must do, for which we can accept no compromise. We can wipe out the swindlers of Wall Street. We can reject the tyranny and robbery practiced by the British and the Dutch oligarchy. We can do that. That's in our political power to do if we act as a nation. It does not guarantee us great profits, great success, but it gives us, by making a pact with our own people, especially the people who are now being deprived, that pact with our people, modeled exactly on what Franklin Roosevelt did in the 1930s, that will do it. We won't get rich. We will still be poor, but we will be going back to what we would like to consider as reality. And the reason we can guarantee that now is because thermonuclear fusion, as an instrument of progress, is now a reality. It is also interlocked with the function of water. With thermonuclear fusion, water has a new, more powerful meaning than was ever before possible. We now, what we are doing in this organization and in the basement of this organization already portends exactly what we can do. All we have to do is decide we're going to take up the option. Get Glass-Steagall through immediately. Don't worry about Wall Street, they're going to go bankrupt. Why are they going to go bankrupt? Because they are bankrupt. And the fraud that they are not bankrupt will be just simply exposed, and that's the end of that matter. So that's where we stand. in short. And I think it was probably better to condense everything into short for your discussion at this point on.